Hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Growth Capital Podcast. I'm your host, Justin Dixon, and today we've got Sam Searcy on the podcast. He is the co-founder and CEO of ClinTrial Research. They are a site network that supports pharmaceutical clinical trials throughout the country. Pretty interesting episode because we dig into his background. He was actually a senator in North Carolina, was reelected also. So pretty interesting about the comparison of raising money for a political campaign, as well as raising money for a startup. So if you're trying to do either, I think you'll get a lot out of it. We dig into the pharmaceutical clinical trial world. And so we talk about how he's running his business as an AI native company differently than maybe he would have if he would have started the business a few years ago. So I think we'll get a lot out of this episode. So let's get Sam on the pod. Interested in hearing conversations with private equity leaders, CEOs of private equity-backed companies, and startup entrepreneurs where they share their stories about their career journeys, starting, investing in, and scaling successful businesses, and the important role that having the right talent plays in building a successful business, then you are in the right place. Welcome back to another episode of the Growth Capital Podcast. Here's your host, Justin Dixon. All right, Sam, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for being a guest.
Thank you. Thank you for the invite. Glad to be here.
Yeah, no, I'm excited. Excited to jump in here. So why don't we jump right in, give everybody a little bit of an overview of who you are, where you are, and what you're up to right now.
Sure. So my name is Sam Searcy. I'm one of the co-founders and currently the CEO of ClinTrial Research. ClinTrial Research is what's known as a site network. So we handle pharmaceutical trials, drug trials on behalf of large pharmaceutical companies throughout our network of physicians. So we, in a sense, do all the back office work to help move new therapies forward. We are based in Raleigh, North Carolina, but we have sites in various states across the country, Texas, Florida, Illinois, to name a few. We mainly focus on nephrology, cardiometabolic disorders, rheumatology, ophthalmology, primary care are some of our big areas. So it's a very exciting business to be in because it's exciting to watch it scale and watch the industry grow, but at the same time to be delivering new therapies that are life-changing, right? I mean, we read every day about some new therapy or stem cell research or gene therapy that's curative in nature, not just helpful to a disorder. And I think that layered in with the advent of more robust AI tools, speeding up that drug development process, is just a really exciting time to be in this industry.
Yeah. How did you get into it? How did you start ClinTrial Research? Like, were you previously in the pharma side of it? Like, how did it all start? And how long have you guys had the business?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I started on the what's called the CRO side, the contract research organization side, way back in 2009.
Okay.
So when the great financial catastrophe happened, I had recently graduated from law school. And back then, even a licensed attorney was useless after the financial crash, the Great Recession. You couldn't find a job anywhere. So I worked for 2 years at the garden center at Lowe's Home Improvement, the hardware store.
Yeah.
Growing up, my parents had a garden center, so I was kind of knowledgeable about plants and trees and that kind of stuff. So I got the job there. It took 2 more years till I found a job, and that job was with a company called PRA Health Sciences, later became Icon. And so I started as a contract manager, quickly promoted, then relocated to London, just outside London for about 2.5 years to help build the team up there. Came back to the United States, went to work for what was then known as Quintiles, which is now IQVIA, in what was a very exciting global role, did a tremendous amount of global travel with that role. But in between those 2 jobs within CROs, I had started and helped found pharmaceutical services companies that later went on to be acquired by other companies. So we had a couple successful exits, which was exciting. I then had a 4-year non-compete, 5-year non-compete, and so took a time out from the industry and ended up running for office, which is very bizarre, a tangent to take on a podcast like this.
Yeah.
But I won, and then I was reelected, and it was actually over a business decision. So North Carolina had passed a law called House Bill 2, which was known as the bathroom bill. We had companies that were pulling headquarters out of the state. Concerts wouldn't locate here. Sports teams refused to come into the state. And the individual that I ended up running against was one of the chief architects of this bill. So, you know, I ran, I won, and, hopefully moved the needle forward a little bit there. But then really needed to get back into business. I think things move a little glacial for my pace in the political world. So I like seeing results faster. And so went back into the private sector with another startup. But that whole time, I had always been interested in this side of the industry. So you have pharma companies, that are thinking and doing the R&D. You have CROs that are carrying out aspects of the clinical research process, but the work happens at the site level, where the doctor, where the physician is, where the physician sees the patient. You recruit the patients in, they're treated on site. And so it was an area that had always intrigued me. And lucky enough, a couple years ago, we were able to found this company. And fast forward, here we are today with 8 sites in several states across the country, scaling rapidly, closing a growth equity round last November, which was helpful to our growth strategy. And again, the industry continues to grow.
Wow, there's a lot to unpack there,
Yeah.
but I want to start. I want to start with the being a senator. I didn't realize this when I had reached out to you, but you were a senator of North Carolina General Assembly. So, how does being in the public office? How does that process? There's two things. One, raising money versus running for office. Because you have to raise money to run for office, or maybe you're self-funded, but you still have to, get votes. So you have to like raise money or raise awareness on you. How does that aspect compare to raising funding for a startup? Raising money, I guess, to get in the Senate, and then raising money for a startup.
I No one's ever asked me that question, but I could tell you both are remarkably similar.
Mm,
You have to have a story, you have a narrative, you have a set of ideas. And really, the measure of people's belief in you is the amount of money you're able to raise. And that
got it.
applies to the business world and it applies to the political world. So if people don't believe in your ideas and think that they're good politically, you're not going to raise any money. And it's the same with the business world. You have to have a solid vision, foundation, and a narrative and a story that goes with that to be able to land investment, institutional investment. You might could do
Yeah.
some seed round or angel funding here or there with less of a story or maybe slightly less of a vision, but I would say they're remarkably the same.
Interesting. And then I guess did raising money for and raising awareness to be elected as a senator and reelected, did that help you from a process, or from like a, hey, this is what I've done in a very interesting kind of raising money area? Did that help you as you're starting to raise funding for ClinTrial?
I think it did. And let me give you a different analogy. So I graduated from a public university. I think the analogy would be, for example, individuals who graduate from Ivy League schools
Mm,
are going to get at least an interview maybe faster than somebody that graduates from somewhere else, but it doesn't guarantee the job.
yeah.
I think that having been a senator was that kind of that same validator. Like people will, okay, I'll take your call. Like
Yeah.
you've
Yeah.
done
Yeah.
something significant outside of business. And then whether that is successful or not completely falls on me or you or the individual that's being spoken about. But I do think it helps open doors because they do due diligence on everyone. Any institutional investor does due diligence. All you have to do is Google somebody when they've been in office and it's all kind of there. Like there's
Yeah.
no hiding. So I think there's some comfort there with that vetting process. And there's comfort with, I always tell people, business and politics are inextricably linked. Absolutely. And it's great to be able to have that knowledge and understanding of how an idea becomes a law and also to be on the business side. Parts of me does miss being in office. I don't miss getting bogged down in things
Mm,
or sort of political infighting. I'm so like in the middle on everything that and I think most business people are. I think most good CEOs are that. Um, I needed to get back to the private sector.
yeah.
I think best way to put it. But it was a fantastic experience.
Yeah, no, that's I could probably ask 30 more questions on this, but I want to get to the crux of why I reached out to you is around starting this business. So I don't know a ton about the pharma world. I've had friends that are pharma reps and med device reps that are out there selling stuff. I've actually helped recruit people for a mid-sized pharmaceutical company up in New Jersey. So I've recruited into and helped hire people for pharma. But I'm curious about the site stuff. So you said like pharma is the ones that are doing the research. They're thinking up the ways that drugs that they're manufacturing or could manufacture could help an existing issue that people are having. And then you've got these CROs. Explain what that is again. And then, but once you get to a clinical trial, then the sites are where all the patients go to be part of the trial, whether they're part of the placebo or part of the actual, getting the drug or et cetera. Can you talk a little bit more?
I think a way to break it out, I'll break it into those three sections. So pharma, what you may hear people refer to as big pharma, I put biotech in there, just any pharmaceutical company, we call them sponsors in the industry. And that's where the research and development happens.
Okay.
Or if you are a very large pharma, well capitalized, you gobble up smaller biotechs to get that technology right, and then keep advancing it through your R&D pipeline. Contract research organizations or CROs are who help design the trials. So they do trial design globally, phase 1 through 4. They help with protocol development, monitoring, which is where you would have a clinical research associate travel to a site from time to time to check the paperwork and the data, which is that's the crux of everything we do, right? It's all about the data that are captured at the site level. And then we're where that work is happening. So everything else is upstream, and we are where the rubber meets the road. So we have the physicians that are key opinion leaders in their field therapeutically. And then we have the patient database as well to recruit the patients into the specific trials that we've been awarded. And that's really it in a nutshell. I mean, we can talk for days about how complicated the whole cycle is, but that's it in a Cliff Note version.
And then do very large, like the GSKs of the world, do they leverage, all three of those kind of pillars, if you will, or because they're such a large organization that they have a lot of that already kind of built in and you're working more with the small and mid-sized pharma and research companies?
We work with everyone. We work with top 20. We work with small or what we call emerging biotech. It spans the whole thing. We work with everyone.
And then are these sites that you have, are they, ClinTrial Research branded sites, or are you kind of more of almost like a third party that are helping to stand up the research or stand up the site within an existing hospital or healthcare practice or whatever? Like, are you building brick and mortar, or are you just leveraging existing actual locations?
So it's the latter. So we call that the embedded model in our industry. So we primarily partner with physicians who are independent, not owned by a private equity group or hospital system. Now, there's some nuance there to that as well, but that's it in a nutshell. The other version of our industry is brick and mortar that you just mentioned, or leasing physical space and then having 1099 physicians come through. And these are sort of the ads you may see on Facebook or Instagram or wherever for clinical trials. We do advertising as well, but any site that doesn't have a patient database to pull from directly, like an EMR system, is going to have to pull their patients 100% from advertising or referral. Yeah.
And then how do you build the network, right? Are you going out to recruit doctors that kind of fit the criteria that you're looking for to say, hey, we would like to add you as a physician in this clinical trial or these types of clinical trials? And then I'm assuming the doctors then get compensated from the clinical trial that they're doing. Like, how does the economics and the kind of nuts and bolts work?
Yeah. So we do some active searching for PIs, or that's what we call our physicians, principal investigators, or PIs for short.
Okay.
What's interesting is a lot of it is introductions through physicians that we already work with. And those be some of the most successful relationships. The number one thing we look for is enthusiasm and responsiveness. If the investigator doesn't seem too interested or thinks this is something they can do a couple hours a week here or there, it's not going to work, because you've got to really be all in on focusing on the clinical research to be successful in that aspect. And it's a mix. So some sites we go after actively, and some locations have been referred to us typically through our internal network and relationships.
And then what's kind of the key like drivers of your business? Is it kind of getting the clinical trial access to those trials so that you can then go recruit or find more locations, or is it the patients? Like, what's the really kind of push and pull that you're really kind of going after, or is it both that you need, obviously clients and they need candidates, if you will, for the trials?
Yeah. So we do bring those study opportunities to our sites, to our locations. So we have a whole commercial strategy or business development group that does that. And then on the other end, we have what we call patient engagement, which are
Mm.
those are the folks that help us figure out, okay, how do we target the patients that need these treatments the most or who could benefit the most? How do we identify them? And then how do we get them enrolled in these trials if they meet the criteria? Now, in between all those things are 100 different other steps that happen in the process. You got to screen the patient. The principal investigator has to be trained. You've got meetings with the sponsor to learn about the therapy that's being tested, and then you've got the patient education piece, because everything that we do is all about the patient and making sure people have access to good health care, whether that's through clinical research or whether that's through the studies that we're helping perform, create better therapies.
And you mentioned a few of the different areas that you focused on. Are any of the, and I'm not anywhere near trained as a medical doctor, so I have no idea what some of the words you said were. But I'm curious if like the patients that the trials that you're doing are very life threatening or very like very specific or nuanced, where it's like this subset of people that this is a death sentence if they get this disease. Maybe share like a little bit around like the severity maybe of some of the trials that you do, because I'm just kind of curious because how that all works.
It's a mix, and it taps into the broader question is that the whole industry has moved from sort of vaccine based, maybe simpler trials that were somewhat higher volume several years ago, to much more complicated trials. Now, our business model was always ready to accommodate the more complex trials, so we were ready for that shift. Other players in the industry, I think, are still adjusting to that.
Mm.
Many of these trials that we conduct may recruit 2 to 4 patients, and that's it. Uh, some large vaccine trials from years past, or even from now, you may see 100, 200, 300 patients enrolled in fairly quick order through a trial like that. The trials that we also run longer.
Okay.
So something like a vaccine trial is going to have a shorter window of treatment where you're measuring data points. Something more complicated, some of our trials go for 4 years, 5 years, usually with a monthly visit or every 2 months. But they can go on for a long time. And yes, some of them are in stage disease trials,
Mm.
which are in some ways the most encouraging when you see the therapies working, I think, because you have people who really they've exhausted all healthcare options from a traditional medicine perspective, and it's kind of a bit of a Hail Mary on a clinical trial, and to see somebody turn around is remarkable,
Yeah.
absolutely. And that's the goal, right?
And how do you like on these longer trials? I think the world has a dwindling attention span as it is. Like, how do you get people to adhere to the restrictions or the limitations or the things they need to do? Because I'm assuming, I don't know, but they have to obviously maybe take a drug, but also monitor their lifestyle, or how involved do some of these trials get where people maybe if they fall off of the adherence to the protocol, obviously they're kicked out of the trial or the data is messy. Like how do you kind of maintain people's engagement?
It's pretty broad. So
Okay.
that done through patient journaling. It can be done through telehealth on longer term trials. But I will tell you, on complicated disease trials that are longer term, that patient's being seen by a physician probably at least once a month,
Okay.
because those treatments would never be anything that we would, for example, mail and they have them inject it, at home or anything, because you have to make sure that environment is controlled, and that's where your data integrity comes in.
Yeah.
And so brief check-ins, how you feeling, how you doing, symptomatic type stuff can be done like we're doing obviously right now. But those therapy administrations are going to always be done by the physician. And
And do
that
they
comes
have a
with questions from our clinical research coordinators when the patient comes in every visit.
And in every clinical trial, is there a placebo group or a control group that doesn't get it, but they think they're getting the drug? Like, is that like a real thing?
Not every trial. Yeah. So
Okay.
there's some trials that are open and everybody knows they're getting the drug. Some are placebo controlled. Some earlier phase trials are healthy individuals. Some are sick individuals. And then some trials, which we call phase 4, are more about data collection. So you're just
Hmm.
looking at data sets and trying to extrapolate different consistencies or trends across that patient group.
And do you guys focus on specific trial numbers, like one clinical trial one, trial two, three, or four, or do you stay with the clinical trial throughout the process? Because obviously there's approvals that need to be had and all that fun stuff throughout.
We tend to focus on phase 2 through 4, with the bulk of our work being phase 2 and 3.
Mm,
There are some areas where you've got sort of a hybridized phase 1 trial that we've had a couple of those, but it's mostly 2 through 4.
yeah.
Phase 1
Moving it.
requires typically a separate facility, 24/7 observation. So you have to have
Mm,
full staff uh, on site. And that's a pretty well established area in the industry anyway. There are a lot of phase 1 players or providers that it's sort of like everybody goes to them because these are
gotcha.
the individual trials. So yeah,
Got it.
it's a pretty established field.
So I guess moving a little bit is into the business side of it. So running a business like this, you probably don't have a lot of overhead in the sense you don't have really brick and mortar because you're not owning these locations. I guess what are some of the areas of concern for you from a business owner, from like how sustainable is your business specifically in this world of clinical trials? Because obviously you are, I guess, reliant on people needing clinical trials because they need drugs and therapeutics moving forward. So from your standpoint, like what are the, I guess, cash flow areas that you're like, hey, we need to be monitoring this because, if we don't get another clinical trial, there's things that could happen. I'm just kind of curious kind of how that works.
So any services based business, and ours is no different, you're the number one cost driver are people, resources, employees, which are critically important. We can't do anything without well trained, well versed employees, clinical research coordinators, what have you, throughout the organization. That's the biggest driver.
Mm,
Like you said, we don't have brick and mortar facilities. We don't build facilities. We do also have lease agreements with all of our practices. And we might hybridize some of those where there's sort of freestanding and sort of an embedded site, a bit of a hybrid model. And so there is some outlay there with those lease agreements. But it's people. And then I think making sure you deploy the right technology. I think tech is a tricky space. If you make some poor decisions on the tech front, it's really going to cost you a fortune in the long
yeah.
run. It could bankrupt you, not making the right choices or selections, or accidentally throwing away $1 million trying to build something that never comes to fruition. I've seen that happen so many times in this industry.
That's a good caveat to the next thing I wanted to talk about, and that's around tech and AI. And obviously, this is a very regulated industry. What are you seeing from an AI space to essentially like help analyze the data faster? Are you seeing it kind of be implemented into the clinical trial side because it is very HIPAA specific compliant? I mean, it's a very regulated area. And I'd imagine even clinical trials is even more, I guess, nuanced to that from a tech perspective.
Couple different approaches there. So there is the application of AI from the R&D side, right? From the drug company side, where they're just crunching enormous amounts of data in a matter of seconds. We are on the services side. So we're not necessarily crunching that data. We get the data to the sponsor. Where we are leveraging AI is to make our company more efficient. So things don't fall through the cracks. People are more efficient. Frankly, we have fewer people because of AI. Now, we didn't have any layoffs or haven't had any due to the implementation of AI because we were launched as an AI native company.
Okay.
So it's very remarkable to have the amount of work we have to have 30 employees. If we had built this company 5 or 6 years ago, we would probably be 80, 90 employees if I had to guess. It's tremendously efficient. And I think part of that was by choice. I mean, we launched at the right time. So the technology, I feel like, had matured to the point that it was ready for companies like us to be aggressive with that tech deployment. Anytime before that 2024, 2025 era, I think was a little too early. It just wasn't ready. And so if you launched before then, imagine even a company of 100 employees and you're trying to roll Claude out. So we're Claude Anthropic as our foundation, our company.
Okay.
How do you do that? How do you roll that out? How do you teach people what an agent is? How do you even build the agents if you've already built this company without AI implemented and ingratiated into your day-to-day work? We're never going to have that problem because we started it from day one like that.
I had a guest on my podcast probably 6 months ago or so or something. We were talking about business and how things have changed or how, and he's like, yeah, I had a question the other day of like, if you were to start your business again from scratch, but thinking about it from the lens of how do I use AI first, right? As opposed to building a process and then trying to shoehorn AI into it. He's like, I would build it completely differently. And it would be super, automated. And so it sounds like you were kind of timing was right for you, where you're probably, some of your competitors are probably savvy with AI, but they're trying to manipulate it an existing manual-ish process to accommodate AI. And some people, employees are nervous about that, right? Because obviously if I can do my job, what took me 8 hours only takes me 8 minutes. Well, what do I do? And I think that's one of the big miscommunications that are going out in the world around AI is like, it's not necessarily replacing a ton of people. It's just making you more efficient so you can be focused on a lot of the more high value aspects of your role than completely replacing it. But I think in your world, you're probably not, to what you just said, like you're not hiring as many people. You're not necessarily laying people off, or you're just not hiring as many people. And so I think that's kind of an interesting dynamic. From a Claude perspective, and as a CEO, I'm kind of curious to get your take on how you're utilizing it to make sure that you're seeing all the things that you need to see, right? You have less people, but you're doing the same amount of work as maybe 80 people. So how do you as a CEO leverage Claude, and what have you built to make your life as running and owning a business, a little more efficient?
So by having all the Claude connectors connected to the systems that we use, I could basically just work out of Claude all day as the only system I use at all. Everything else that I do is dashboard driven through Claude. So it's pulling data from our CTMS system. It's pulling data from Ramp, which is the finance system that we use to help manage the company, QuickBooks, whatever I need to know. Patient enrollment, patient engagement, it's all coming into these dashboard views. And that's how I'm able to see across the whole company, minute to minute, day to day. And it is fantastic. I can't even remember what it was like. Well, I can still remember what it's like to have to run something without that visibility. And the reality is it was a lot more meetings back then, right? You had to have a meeting all the time, every time you wanted a piece of information. And now it's all there. Now the questions are, is it entered? Are the data entered correctly? Then these numbers are right. And it is remarkable. I feel like I'm able to do, I say this all the time, the work of 4 or 5 people in a day consistently. I mean, the level and quality of reporting that comes out of Claude, the financial analysis, the dashboard views that we API in through other systems is remarkable. It really is.
And I guess I'm curious about going back to kind of the clinical trial side of it. How do you think the next kind of 12 months are going to look? Because you started the business a few years ago, are clinical trial needs increasing, decreasing, staying the same? Like, what's the outlook like from you? Because obviously you need that to kind of fill the funnel.
Yeah, it's increasing, which is
Hmm.
fantastic, obviously, for us and for other people in the industry. We launched at a time in a lull.
Okay.
I love to start a business in either a recession or a lull because it kind of only goes up from there.
Yeah.
And so, two things we did that were really difficult. We did de novo site creation, which was going out, finding our first few sites, and then embedding. We did that in a downturn in the market
Mm.
when there were fewer trials. So, I feel very confident having survived that period and then successfully landing growth equity a year or so later. We're definitely on the right track. When I look just at the recent earnings reports coming out of CROs, because most clinical trials still are run through CROs, they're all up. Everything's up, up, and up. So that is always a very strong indicator that we know more trials are coming because we work with all of the large global CROs and will eventually be selected as a site on some of those trials that they're winning. So it has definitely increased.
Got it. So you build relationship with the CROs. The CROs have the relationships with the big pharma or pharma companies. So you're not going direct to pharma. You're going to the CRO, and that's where you get your pipeline.
It's both, actually.
Okay.
So we get a lot of direct from pharma or direct to pharma. And then we also get selected a lot by CROs.
Mm.
So it's really up to the pharma company whether they want to do their own site selection or let the CRO do site selection or use a mix of that approach.
Yeah. Because you started your business as more of an AI native organization, so you kind of had the ability to test, try things, even, and you knew kind of what legacy systems look like, and then how to maybe use AI from the start. What advice? And I'm not trying to give your competitors advice here, but like, what advice would you give to somebody that has a business, whether it's in your industry or another, that believes AI is going to change the world even more so than it already has, and you're trying to move from a paper-based, so to speak, kind of manual process to very AI forward and kind of bringing people along? Like, what would you say to kind of like somebody that wanted to like almost restart without restarting their business with an AI lens?
I think first you have to understand how it works really well. And what I
Mm.
think you may remember literally just probably 8 or 9 months ago, the big term was prompt engineer. Like everybody
Yeah.
needed a prompt engineer. And I was just thinking to myself, why would I need a prompt engineer if this technology gets good enough? It should be able to prompt itself, basically, if you
Yeah.
know, ask the right questions. And I think everything really changed on February 5th. I believe that was the day that OpenAI and Anthropic both came out with their upgrades. And that upgrade to Claude, it
Mm.
felt like you were in Claude before that, as was was I felt like 10 years of research or development on their end had rolled out in one day, like from February
Got it.
4th, one thing, and then February 5th, it's doing magnitudes more in terms of work. But I think you have to understand there is no course, there is no book. I mean, maybe there is, but I think you just have to get in there and play around and learn roughly how it works, how the machine learning builds on itself, and then figure out ways to implement it within your company. We have employees that are probably anywhere from retirement age to in their 20s. And some of the more advanced users of Claude are our older employees
Mm.
uh, who very quickly latched onto the fact that I can put this document in there and then suddenly it can give me a draft SOP or whatever. And so it's been fantastic. Now, having said that, we have 30 employees. So it's a lot easier for a company of our size. It's a lot easier for a company that launched right on
Yeah.
the when AI was becoming relevant. It's been around for a long time, but it to me didn't become relevant, not to small business or mid-sized business until a couple years ago.
Yeah.
Uh, you just got to learn it, and then you got to figure out the areas where it can actually make your company more efficient and go from there and figure out how to build it out.
Yeah, I've always been telling people because I get pitched a lot of AI stuff as an investor, but also as a business owner. And you always just like, I want to pick what's the most critical thing that I can, if I improve it by 2, 3x from a time perspective, it's going to make the business that much more efficient, right? So you pick one thing as opposed to trying to boil the ocean and trying to solve all your problems. It's like pick one thing, work on it, make sure it works well, and then move on to the next one and kind of iterate as opposed to, you know, trying to fix everybody's problem or everyone's problem in the company right away. So
I think that's well put. And so my greatest takeaway from AI is that it is so bespoke to the organization, to the company. My AI platform would not work at another company that's set up a different way. And I think I've learned that that's the approach I think is the most successful approach. And a lot of AI companies come in and just want to plop down, some sort of framework. And it just doesn't work like that. And frankly, 6 months later, that whole business model has already been replaced by Opus 4.9 or whatever version. So it's fascinating to watch AI companies have to adapt quickly or go out of business.
Yeah, there's a lot that have been displaced because of an update to ChatGPT or Anthropic or Claude or whatever, because what they were doing now is done with a click of a button in an existing LLM. So I was alive during the dot-com boom. I wasn't old enough to know what was going on, and I lived in a very small town, so I didn't know what dot-com was. But I imagine this is what it's like. And now that I live in Silicon Valley, I'm imagining this is probably similar to what it was like. It's a lot of people are trying to chase and build businesses and raise a bunch of money, and hopefully they're the ones that are successful, and some of them go out of business and some of them work.
It's exactly the same. And I'm old enough to remember both. So I'm 50 now. And I remember people would come out with websites. Like I can remember this one website was china.com. And they would register the domains. And then they would turn around and try to sell it for like $250,000 or whatever. People would buy it.
Yeah.
I mean, it was absolutely insanity. And then it crashed. And 3 or 4 players emerged and it settled out. Same exact thing is going to happen with AI. I don't know. I mean, if I had to pick a winner right now, it'd be Anthropic, but is there a new one? I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
We'll see. We shall see. Well, I want to pivot to the end here. I've got a 3-pack of questions that I ask every guest. So let's run through those. First question here is, what's an influential book or even a podcast that you'd recommend that you found helpful?
I have to, there are 2.
Okay.
I still think the book, The First 90 Days, and I think the author was that Michael Watkins, I think. Fantastic. I mean, whether you're coming into a new role, whether you're starting a company, what you do and the way you plan that initial launch, and it doesn't physically have to be 90 days, obviously, it could be 6 months, is extremely helpful. I found that book very helpful when I was put into a role that I probably was not qualified for. But I read that book and then I realized, at certain levels of corporate America, no one's really qualified. It's just you become a problem solver.
Yeah.
And those that show aptitude to be able to do that go on to become successful. There is no guidebook. I think you realize in the framework in that book. The other book I would say is The Management System, and that's by Vern Davenport. It was written by, he is a partner in a large private equity firm based here in Raleigh called QHP Capital Partners. And I have not only read the book, but we implemented the system that is in that book throughout the organization. And I know most private equity or institutional investor companies probably have a similar structure or way they look at things. He just published his, and it made perfect sense to me when I read it, and has had a big impact on our company.
That's awesome. I think a lot of business books say a very similar thing. They just say it in a way. Some business books resonate with people, others resonate with other people. A lot of the stuff is not, nobody's reinventing the wheel, right? It's just a matter of, did they say it in a way that resonates with my brain and the way I think about it? So yeah, no, I'll have to check that one out.
Yeah, for sure.
Second question here. What is your favorite thing to do outside of work?
So I coach flag football, which I love.
Okay.
Yeah, so we have 4 kids. Our 2 youngest are still young enough to be, in that youth sport kind of phase. That's so much fun. Honestly, we had this crazy game the other day where I guess one of the other team coaches didn't show up, so it turned into a scrimmage. So we had like boys and girls play. We just divided the kids up to play. And this little she was either 7 or 8-year-old girl, and we had kids up to 10 or 11 playing out. She said, I'm a really good quarterback. And she was not tall. She was pretty short. And I thought, okay. So I gave her the ball and I told her what to do. And it was the last play of the game. We were down 2 points and we were at the other end of the field, and she throws a pass. It gets caught and the kid runs for a touchdown and we win. Moment we felt as good as selling my first company.
Put me in, coach.
Very fulfilling. Aside from that, I do a lot of landscaping, a lot of yard work. So you may have heard me mention earlier in the podcast, my parents had a garden center growing up. So I kind of grew up around plants and so became very knowledgeable about them. So I have like a really great yard, basically. And I love that. Yeah.
I grew up on a small farm in PA, and I hated the weekends were always weeding and doing all the mulching and all that stuff. So I did not get a green thumb during that whole process, unfortunately. But it sounds like you did. That's great. Awesome. Last question here. Favorite vacation spot?
It's always somewhere in the mountains. So I grew up just outside Asheville, North Carolina.
Yep.
And so I love the Blue Ridge Mountains. But anywhere I go, I always gravitate toward the mountains. When I'm in California, I gravitate toward the mountains. If I'm in Europe, I gravitate toward the Alps. I think it's just in my blood. I love the beach. It's great. Probably more of a lake guy than a beach guy. But something about mountains I've just always loved. Hiking, mountain biking, whatever.
Getting out in nature is probably a component of that.
Right.
Awesome.
Right.
Well, Sam, man, it's been really cool to learn about your story and hear about the business and also hear about being a senator. Obviously, maybe we'll have you back on and we'll talk more about that. But if people want to reach out to you, learn about what you're doing, what you've done, and maybe pick your brain about AI or clinical trials, what's the best way to connect with you?
I would honestly just through my LinkedIn is the best way. I check all those messages, even though I do get spammed a lot. I still go through everything daily. And that's the best way.
Got it. Well, we'll definitely have your LinkedIn profile in the show notes here. Sam, it's been great to meet you. I really appreciate you being a guest on the pod.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I hope you found at least one actionable insight from this episode of the Growth Capital Podcast, your one-stop shop for insights from private equity leaders, CEOs, and startup entrepreneurs on starting, investing in, and scaling successful businesses, as well as the role having the right talent plays in growing a successful business. It would be greatly appreciated if you would rate and review this podcast. And if you're watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe and drop us a comment so we can expand the audience of this podcast. Thank you for all your support, and don't forget about upcoming episodes dropping every Tuesday.